Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like no matter what you accomplish, someone else always gets the credit. Today I want to share a deeply personal story about what happens when the people closest to us try to rewrite our achievements, and how I finally found the courage to reclaim my narrative. My name is Tosin, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes you have to fight for your own seat at the table, especially when that table is in your own family's house. This isn't just about sibling rivalry or family drama. It's about something much deeper, the systematic erasure of someone's contributions, the quiet theft of recognition, and the moment when staying silent becomes more painful than speaking up. If you've ever been told to keep the peace while watching someone else take credit for your work, or if you've ever sat at the wrong end of the family table while others celebrated achievements that were partly yours, then this story is for you. Let's dive in. It was supposed to be a celebration. At least that's how my mother, Lake, described it when she called me that Tuesday afternoon in March 2024. Her voice was warm and inviting, like honey mixed with promises she rarely kept. "Just a nice family dinner, Tosin," she said, as if we hadn't spent the last 5 years pretending I was some distant relative instead of her youngest daughter. I should have known better than to expect warmth, but I definitely didn't expect the paper napkin. When I arrived at the upscale restaurant in Victoria Island, Lagos, the hostess guided me past the main table, past the elegant arrangement of white orchids and crisp linen napkins, straight to a small side table tucked near the restroom corridor. There it was, a single-place setting with a paper napkin that had my name scribbled in blue biro ink. Everyone else had beautiful printed name cards with gold edges. "Are you sure this is mine?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The hostess smiled politely and said, "Yes, Mrs. Lake specifically requested this arrangement." She turned away before I could respond. I sat down slowly, smoothing my dress, a nice Ankara print I'd spent weeks selecting for this occasion. Across the room, my sister Kemi sparkled like a Nollywood actress, perfectly dressed in her designer outfit, her laughter echoing through the private dining room. She caught my eye for a brief moment, then looked away as if she hadn't seen me. As family members filtered in, the air filled with the sounds of clinking glasses, animated conversations about business deals, overseas investments, and luxury vacation plans. Everyone had a success story to share. I had a paper napkin. When the appetizers arrived, prawns, spring rolls, and some fancy cheese arrangement, I barely touched them. I focused on breathing, on staying present, on not letting the humiliation show on my face. That's when my cousin Beezy asked, "Tosin, what are you doing for work these days?" Her fork paused mid-air like my answer wasn't worth finishing her bite. "I'm in property development," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Oh," she blinked, "so like managing rental apartments and things like that?" Before I could clarify, Kemi's voice cut through from 3 chairs away. She was always listening, always ready with a comment. "She's being modest," Kemi announced to the table. "Tosin handles those cute little student accommodations. Perfect for people just starting out, you know." I kept my hands folded in my lap, my face expressionless. The conversation moved on without me, flowing around topics I actually knew intimately. Construction permits, urban development, investment portfolios, as if I didn't exist. Then came dessert time. The server approached with the dessert menu, and that's when Kemi delivered her masterstroke. She waved the menu away from our end of the table theatrically and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "We'll skip dessert on this side. Budget season, right, sis?" The laughter that followed felt like broken glass. Uncle Tundi nearly choked on his drink. Aunt Peju gave that tight little shake of her head that meant poor thing. Even my mother smiled. Small, embarrassed, but unmistakably there. I stared at the untouched tiramisu on the main table and realized I was already full of humiliation, full of years of being treated like the family's charity case. But I wasn't broke, and I wasn't unsuccessful. They just didn't know the truth. Not yet. That night at the restaurant wasn't an isolated incident. It was the latest chapter in a story that had been written about me for years. A story where I was always the supporting character in someone else's success narrative. I remember my university graduation in 2018. I had been selected as the valedictorian for my department. Only 2 students received this honor each year. My professors were thrilled, and I was proud. I had worked incredibly hard, maintaining a first-class average while working part-time to support myself. But the week before graduation, Kemi announced her engagement. My mother called me that very evening. "Tosin, I'm so proud of what you've achieved. Truly I am. But this weekend is about your sister. She's waited so long for this moment. Don't take the attention away from her." I didn't even fight it. I told the dean I was sick and sat in the audience in a simple dress, while someone else gave a mediocre speech about embracing the future. My mother applauded loudly for Kemi's engagement announcement, and my sister beamed as she showed off her ring, saying, "See how everything works out when we support each other." The pattern continued through the years. In 2019, I submitted a detailed business proposal for a microfinance initiative to help small business owners in Surulere. I spent months researching, conducting interviews, and creating financial projections. I shared the draft with my mother, hoping for feedback. 3 weeks later, Kemi announced her new vision for community development at a family brunch, using my exact phrases, my research, even my contact list. When I pointed out the similarities, my mother said, "You girls think so much alike. It's wonderful how you inspire each other. But inspiration flows both ways. Theft only goes one direction." At the 2020 Christmas party, I offered to speak about our local food bank initiative, something I'd been quietly funding and organizing for 2 years. The host handed me the microphone, and I got exactly 3 sentences out before Kemi waved over a board member and started talking about her latest boutique opening. I paused, waiting for a natural break in her conversation. She didn't stop. Under the table, my mother's hand found mine, not for comfort, but as a signal. "Stop. This isn't your moment." So I stopped. I handed back the microphone and smiled like a good daughter should. But that was the last time I tried to speak at any family gathering. Until now. The real shock came 3 months after that humiliating dinner, when I decided to do some digging into my family's various business ventures. I'd always been told that we shared resources, that family money flowed naturally between us for mutual benefit. What I discovered was something else entirely. I spent a Saturday afternoon in my small apartment in Yaba, going through old bank statements, investment documents, and partnership agreements I'd signed over the years. What I found made my hands shake. Every major project Kemi had been praised for, minus the housing development in Lekki, the shopping complex in Ikeja, the agricultural investment in Ogun State, had one common thread: initial funding by A. Okafor. That was me, Tosin Okafor. The Lekki project that won her the Young Entrepreneur of the Year award in 2023. I had provided the initial capital of 50 million naira, the shopping complex that got her featured in This Day newspaper. My money had secured the land, the agricultural venture she'd presented at the Lagos Business Forum. I was the silent partner who'd covered all the startup costs. But in every public document, every press release, every award ceremony, I was invisible. Legally, the LLCs belonged to her, but the risk and the capital came from my accounts. She was the face, I was the funding. She got the credit, I got the liability. I printed out 5 pages of evidence and spread them across my dining table like pieces of a puzzle. Bank transfers, incorporation documents, loan guarantees, all bearing my signature, my account numbers, my financial responsibility. Yet somehow, I'd been written out of every success story. The most painful discovery was a property transfer document from 6 months earlier, a mixed-use development in Surulere that I had personally funded through what I thought was our family investment fund. But the latest deed showed ownership under Kemi Okafor Properties Limited. My mother's signature was on the transfer document, but something looked wrong. The handwriting seemed too steady, the date too convenient. Either my mother had signed something without understanding it, or Kemi had helped herself to something that didn't belong to her. Again, I waited 2 days before acting. 2 days of sleepless nights, of staring at the ceiling and wondering how I'd let this happen for so long. 2 days of deciding whether to stay quiet and keep the peace, or finally demand the truth. On Monday morning, I showed up at my mother's house in Ikoyi, the same house whose mortgage I'd helped pay when she was going through her divorce. Kemi was already there. She was always there, playing the perfect daughter role. I found Kemi alone in the garden, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. "Can we talk?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She turned with that practiced smile already in place. "Of course, what's on your mind?" I handed her a manila envelope. She didn't open it immediately. "That's the original ownership document for the Cerullo property," I said calmly, "and the transfer paperwork you filed 6 months ago." Her smile flickered slightly. "What are you trying to say, Tosin?" "I'm saying that either you forged Mama's signature, or she signed something she didn't understand. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just pointing out that one of those things happened." Kemi's composure cracked just slightly. "Are we really doing this here, in Mama's garden?" "You did this," I replied. "I'm just choosing not to let it rot in silence anymore." She looked away, then back at me with narrowed eyes. "You always think people are trying to hurt you. You see enemies everywhere." I didn't take the bait. "If this isn't corrected by next Friday, I won't handle it quietly next time." "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "It means I'll take it to the Corporate Affairs Commission, or to the newspapers. Depends on who responds first." I didn't wait for her response. I walked back into the house, hugged my mother goodbye, and left. But that evening, I went deeper into the family financial records. What I found was a systematic pattern of appropriation spanning over 5 years. A family trust fund, established under my name and social security number, titled Okafor Emergency Support Fund, supposedly for mutual family assistance. The only deposits came from me. The only withdrawals, Kemi, for business development, travel consulting, and health investments. Cute labels for what were essentially lifestyle upgrades. I wasn't just being excluded from credit. I had been financing my own exclusion. I closed every account tied to that trust fund. Then I sent one email, simple, direct, with a clear subject line: correction required, financial discrepancies. The attachment was a detailed spreadsheet, color-coded and comprehensive. One tab showed investment flows, another showed public credit allocations, and the third showed the legal exposure of continuing to misrepresent fund sources. Kemi didn't reply, neither did my mother. But I wasn't looking for their approval anymore. I was issuing a notice, and they would understand it in the language they respected most: documentation, risk assessment, and public accountability. When I got no response after 5 days, I made a decision that would change everything. I created a LinkedIn post, 3 slides, professionally formatted, devastatingly clear. Slide 1, a property title with my name in bold letters. Kemi's conspicuously absent. Slide 2, the original development proposal, with my signature at the bottom, dated 2 years before Kemi's innovative presentation. Slide 3, a time-stamped photo from my office security camera, showing me working on the agricultural project proposal that later won her an industry award. The caption was simple: "Legacy is built, not borrowed." I didn't monitor the shares or count the likes, but within an hour, messages started coming in. A former colleague from the Planning Commission. About time someone set the record straight. A contact from the Small Business Association. We always wondered who the real brain was behind those projects. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice tight with controlled anger. "What do you think you're doing, Tosin?" "I'm correcting the public record," I said evenly. "You're making this ugly. You're embarrassing the family." "No, Mama, I'm making it honest." The embarrassment was pretending this was normal. There was a long pause. "You know how these things work. Once people start digging, you won't come out clean either." That made me laugh. Actually laugh. I spent 5 years leaving a clear paper trail of everything I built. Kemi spent 5 years hiding her fingerprints from what she didn't. Let them dig. The next weekend, I did something I'd never done before. I organized my own event, not at some fancy hotel or exclusive club, but in the community I'd actually invested in minus the Cerulea development that had my name on the real documents. I rented a small space in the local community center and invited everyone who had been impacted by the various projects over the years. Small business owners who'd gotten microloans, families who'd found affordable housing, students who'd received scholarships from the programs I'd quietly funded. It wasn't elegant or Instagram-worthy, just plastic chairs, local food, and honest conversation. But it was real, and it was mine. Midway through the evening, a young woman named Funmi approached me. She owned a small tailoring business that had expanded thanks to one of the microcredit programs. "Sister Tosin," she said, "I've been seeing your name in the papers, and I just want to say thank you. That loan changed my life, but I never knew who actually provided it until now." Others shared similar stories. The mechanic whose shop expansion I'd guaranteed, the teacher whose classroom renovation I'd funded, the widow whose children's school fees I'd covered through a scholarship program. These people had never heard of Kemi's awards or newspaper features. They knew the person who had actually shown up, who had actually invested in their community, who had actually made their lives better. As the evening wound down, I realized something profound. I didn't need my family's validation anymore. I had something more valuable: the respect and gratitude of people whose lives I'd actually touched. 2 weeks later, I received an official invitation, not to a family dinner or social gathering, but to a formal hearing with the Lagos State Small Business Development Board. The subject line read, "Investigation into Misrepresentation of Community Development Funding Sources." I arrived at the government building in Aloza on a Tuesday morning, dressed professionally but not ostentatiously. Kemi was already there with her lawyer and a PR representative. My mother sat nearby, looking smaller and older than I remembered. The board chairwoman opened the meeting directly. "We're here to investigate claims about the authorship and funding of several community development projects that have received public recognition and government support." I placed a leather folder on the table, not dramatically, just methodically. "I believe you'll find all the necessary documentation here," I said calmly. "Bank records, incorporation documents, loan agreements, and correspondence dating back to 2019. The board members passed the documents around. One by one, their expressions shifted from skeptical to serious to concerned. Every project Kemi had claimed credit for was backed by my financial records, my signatures, my risk. When Kemi tried to speak, claiming that family businesses naturally overlap, I was ready. Then why was I never included in any public acknowledgement? Why was my name removed from press releases? Why were award ceremonies scheduled when I was out of town? The room fell silent. Finally, the chairwoman spoke. "Miss Kemi, do you have documentation showing your financial contribution to these projects?" Kemi's lawyer whispered something in her ear. She shook her head. "This is a family matter that's been blown out of proportion." "Fraud is not a family matter," I replied quietly. "It's a legal matter." The investigation took 3 weeks. When it concluded, Kemi was required to make public corrections to all previous statements about her role in the community development projects. She was also disqualified from receiving further government recognition for projects she hadn't actually funded or conceptualized. More importantly to me, the community programs were transferred to my direct oversight, ensuring they would continue serving the people who actually needed them. The aftermath wasn't immediately healing, but it was honest. My mother struggled with the new reality where I wasn't the quiet, accommodating daughter who absorbed everyone else's needs. Kemi avoided me entirely for months, but slowly things began to shift. 6 months after the hearing, my mother called me on a Sunday evening, not to ask for anything, not to mediate between me and Kemi, but just to check on me. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began carefully, "about keeping the peace versus keeping the truth." I waited. I think I confused the two for a long time. I thought protecting Kemi meant I had to diminish you. That wasn't fair. It wasn't a full apology, but it was acknowledgement. For my mother, that was significant. Kemi took longer. Almost a year later, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked different, less polished, more uncertain. We sat in my small living room for 20 minutes without saying much. Finally, she spoke. I convinced myself that I was just the face of what we were building together, that you preferred being behind the scenes. I looked at her directly. Did you ever ask me what I preferred? She shook her head. No. I assumed. We didn't hug that day. We didn't make grand promises about sisterly reconciliation, but we started talking. Really talking. For the first time in years. Today I run the Oka for Community Development Initiative from a small office in Cerule. It's not glamorous, but it's transparent. Every project has clear documentation. Every contributor gets appropriate credit. Every beneficiary knows exactly where their support comes from. I've learned that being invisible isn't the same as being humble, and that keeping peace often means enabling injustice. I've learned that family loyalty shouldn't require self-erasure, and that love without respect isn't really love at all. Most importantly, I've learned that your story belongs to you. If you don't tell it, someone else will mine, and they'll tell the version that serves them, not the version that honors you. The young women who come through our programs now see something different than what I grew up with. They see a woman who fought for her own recognition, who refused to be written out of her own story, who built something substantial and put her name on it. They learn that being supportive doesn't mean being silent, and that being family doesn't give anyone the right to steal your thunder. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or if you've ever had someone take credit for your work, I want you to know that your experience is valid, your contributions matter, and your voice deserves to be heard. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who find it easiest to diminish us, because they know we'll probably accept it in the name of keeping peace. But peace built on inequality isn't peace. It's just quiet oppression. You don't need permission to own your achievements. You don't need approval to tell your truth. And you definitely don't need to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Your story is yours to tell. Make sure you're the one telling it. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to reclaim your own narrative? Have you ever supported someone who was being overlooked or erased? Share your experiences. Let's build a community where everyone's contributions are recognized and valued. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more real stories about family, success, and finding your voice. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss future content. And remember, your story matters, and so do you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.